question. What is $1 billion mean, and why are people so upset that there are billionaires? Great question, Mama Llama. You're coming in hot with the math questions that overlap society. All right, let's break it down. So, what does it mean to have $1 billion or more? And why is it a big deal right now? Why are people upset? Should we be upset? Great questions. Let's talk about it. Yay! Welcome to STEM Bites, where we break down science, tech, engineering, and mathematics concepts, especially as they relate to society. Woo! Because it's all interconnected, babies. Okay, so first, what does it actually mean to have $1 billion? Well, let's say you had $1 billion, 1 billion, and you spent $1,000 every single day. Every single day, you dropped $1,000 on your favorite shenanigans of the day. It would take you 2,000. Hold on, we're going to write this one down. It would take you 2,740 years. Years to spend $1,000 every day if you had $1 billion in total. That's wild to me, right? I can't even fathom what I would spend that much money on. Hence why we are seeing a lot of the silly shenanigans that we are seeing today, because no one really knows what to do with $1,000 every day. No one really knows what to do with $1 billion every day, or $1 billion or more. And so we're seeing things like billionaires buying elections. Um, we'll just leave it there. Um, so it's not so much that having $1 billion is the problem, right? The problem is that in the last few years, the acceleration of billionaire wealth has grown tremendously. And in fact, billionaire wealth has increased by 3 times in the last year compared to 2023, while the number of people in poverty has barely changed since 1990. So that means there is a very, very small number of people whose wealth has exploded. They have so much money, they don't even know what to do with it. While people that are barely scraping by and can barely afford food and medicine and shelter, that number has not changed. So the idea of trickle down economics is been debunked many, many, many times. And when we look at data like that there are a lot more billionaires and poverty hasn't changed, we can say, okay, trickle down has been debunked. Check. Let's figure out what else we can do to make things more equal. Why do we need to have things more equal? Why does it matter that there are so many billionaires and that the number of people in poverty hasn't changed? Well, personally, I care about people. And so, when I see a society where somebody has so much money that they literally can't spend it all in an entire lifetime, and then I see somebody who doesn't have a home, I think that that society is broken because we come together as a society in an agreement to take care of each other. If that argument doesn't sway you, just consider the fact that economies are not driven by billionaire dollars. They cannot spend all this money. Economies are driven by middle class citizens, middle class consumers. Those are the folks that keep the wheels of the economy turning. Those are the folks that are paying for the basic necessities that we all need. Billionaires don't tend to buy basic necessities. They don't need to. They pay other people to do all these things for them. And that's not a value judgment. It just is what it is. But it does not keep the wheels of the economy turning. There's only so many pants that any one person needs. And if you only have a small number of people that can afford to buy pants, you're not going to have a very good pants market and everybody else suffers. So when you're looking at how to keep an economy functioning and healthy, you need a healthy middle class. And when you have a small number of people that have an exorbitant amount of money, and you have a lot of people that don't have a lot of extra cash to go and contribute to the economy, that's when you have major problems in your economy. Okay, The other issue is that billionaire wealth, about 60%, has especially in the last few years, has actually come from pretty shady places. So most billionaire wealth is taken. And by taken, I mean it is not earned. In general, a lot of billionaire wealth is not earned. 60% of billionaire wealth comes from three main sources. The first big one, which is about a third, so 36%, is inheritance. Um, inheritance. So this is someone who is passing down their fortune to their families. So this number has increased significantly in the last few decades. The second big source, 18%, is in monopoly power. So Amazon is a really good example of this, monopoly power. And the reason why this is bad is because consumers are forced to make purchases from the firm that has the monopoly. So consumers do not have a choice. And so this wealth is effectively taken because monopolies are not how a free market functions healthily. And in fact, it represents a breakdown of the free market. Um, Monopolies, I've seen this multiple times in the startup industry. WeWork is kind of a classic example. So when I ran a small business, my friends and I worked at a co-working space that we really loved. But WeWork came in. It had a lot of funding from investors, and they had enough cash to basically lower their prices. They had enough cash to lose money until they put a bunch of these co-working spaces out of business. And then once all those co-working spaces went out of business, once all the competitors were gone, WeWork jacked up the prices, and now they're the only club in town that you could go for a co-working space. They had a funky founder, so they kind of blew up a little bit internally. Not going to get into that one, but that's what I have seen a lot in the startup culture, where this special unicorn startup gets a lot of attention and a lot of funding. Uber and Lyft kind of did the same thing. Uber is in particular really bad, where they artificially lower their prices to try to eliminate the competition. And then when all the competition goes out of business because they can't compete, then that company can charge whatever prices they want and the consumers are stuck. And as somebody who has seen surge pricing at $140 to go 3 miles on Halloween, I can tell you that is bad for consumers because then ultimately that market doesn't work for anybody. Okay, and then the third big source of the 60% being taken is called cronyism. So this is about 6%. And cronyism, I actually was like, what does cronyism actually mean? So cronyism is basically when you give your friends money or appointments that make them a lot of money. So the classic example is like political appointments or lobbying positions where the ultra wealthy are just exchanging money and favors back and forth. At the detriment of everybody else, because cronyism means that person is not necessarily qualified for the position. It's nepotism to basically your friends. So bad, right? Because when we go and get a job, we have to interview for that position. We have to show that we are qualified. And when you have cronyism, the people that get those positions are not qualified. It's only that they know that person. They do not have to interview in the ways that we do. So that is pretty bad. Okay, so this kind of blew my mind that 60% of billionaire wealth is taken through these main ways. But the other thing that I want to call out is that billionaires don't make money like you and I. I'm assuming there's probably no billionaires watching this video. But yeah, they don't make money like you and I. They don't take home an income. They don't have a salary. They don't get paid by the hour. Billionaires make money in two main ways. Well, I'll erase my little board and we will do another color. Let's use red. So billionaires make money in two main ways. The first is investments. So most, well, I shouldn't say most, but like some of y'all will have investments in the stock market. You might have investments in other areas, maybe real estate. But this is really the big area where a lot of billionaires make their money. And in fact, a full 15% of billionaires made their money exclusively from investments. But really, long term, this is how the ultra wealthy continue to make money. They don't work for their money. They might have worked, and it's also not to say that like investments are a bad thing or that it's bad to make money from investments. But I think the key that I want to drive home here is that people that have $1 billion or more or hundreds of millions of dollars or more, they aren't working for that money like you and I are working for it. A lot of times I see dialogue around how, like, well, they earned their money. To a certain extent, I totally agree. I really believe that people that work hard, that have innovative ideas, that shape our society and change things, especially when we change things for the better and make a really positive impact on society, when we innovate and come out with stuff like smartphones, that's amazing, and people should absolutely be rewarded for those types of things. But I believe there's a limit also, right? Do I think that a CEO of a company brings more than 2,000 times the value of the lowest paid employee that is keeping the lights on in that company? No. The CEO of that company depends on all of the employees of that business. A business is made of people. Without all of the workers, the business falls apart. And I've kind of seen this trend towards this hyper worship of the people at the top. And it's like, yes, that is a very hard job. I don't want to be the CEO. Well, maybe I would be the CEO of my own little company, but like I don't want to be the CEO of a large company. That sounds stressful. You can't turn your clock off. But also, I don't believe that that CEO adds more than 2,000 times the value I add. I contribute a ton to the work that I do. I am shifting a large ship. I'm steering, helping to steer a large ship, and I'm adding a ton of value. And I believe that I also should be rewarded appropriately for that value, and so should everybody else that contributes. So that's kind of the distinction that I want to make. Is like, it's not to say that billionaires are bad people or that they don't deserve to be wealthy. It's that the proportions are out of whack. When you have the ability to spend $1,000 every day, and it'll take you almost 3,000 years to do that, and there's somebody that can't afford to eat, it's like, that's a little bit out of proportion, so let's bring it back into proportion. And one of the ways to think about it when we're talking about proportions is like, if you have a lot of money to invest, then you will make a lot of money in investments. Because if you have $100 million to invest and you have a 5% return on investment, 100 million with 5% ROI, then you're going to make 5% of 100 million, which is going to be 5 million. Oh my God. Yeah. So let's say in a year. So you're going to make $5 million on 100 million every year. And the second big way that folks make $1 billion is honestly typically in startups. So either you found a startup, you create a startup, maybe you go and you sell it, you get investment money, or the people that are making a lot of money from startups are investing in startups. So the like again, the ways that you get to $1 billion are not through labor. It's not through traditional labor, I should say. And it's not that I don't believe people should be wealthy, but I do believe that it needs to be appropriately balanced in society so that everybody has the opportunity to be comfortable, to have their basic needs met, because that makes us all better off. There's a lot of evidence that shows that societies are safer, societies are healthier, societies have more opportunities for more people when things are more equal. And we are really out of balance right now. And so we're seeing a lot of instability in a lot of areas. And in my personal opinion, I believe that a lot of that can be traced back to the extreme wealth inequality that we have in the United States, um, in particular. So I kind of want to end by just calling out the fact that, like, most billionaires did not start out self-made. Um, I'm going to give you a list of 5 people that got loans from their family. Okay, so Jeff Bezos started out with a $250,000 loan from his parents. Musk came from a wealthy family and got at least a $28,000 from his loan from his dad for his first software company. Mark Zuckerberg got a $100,000 loan from his dad for Facebook. Trump got $9 million in his inheritance in the 1990s, as well as $6 million over the years in loans from his dad for his various ventures. And the Kardashians' dad left them $100 million in inheritance. So it's not like family support is totally fine. Like, my parents have helped me a lot. They paid for my college, which I'm very, very grateful for. And that's why I've tried to work so hard to pay that forward. Um, I believe that every family, if I had kids, I believe that every family that can afford to put their kids through an education should do so, because it has a really, really high and known ROI. And also, not everybody has those opportunities. And so I think it's really important when we think about the narrative of these people. Well, number one, they're just people, right? They're people like you and I. And they've had a lot of support, and that's okay. Support is great. But it's also very human, right? um, Financial support, emotional support, those are really, really critical features of success. And so when we think about billionaires, remember they are people. We should talk about them as people. They're not, most of them are not necessarily evil. But we should, I also think that when we use those kinds of words, we step away from real reforms that we can enact as a society, because there are ways to balance things out. There are ways to build better systems and to, make sure that everybody can contribute, that everybody has opportunities, and looking at it from a mathematical lens, from a data-based lens, and from a compassionate lens can really help us make better decisions. Okay, so I will end it there. I hope that this was helpful and informative. I will link a really interesting article from Oxfam that did some research on wealth and global poverty, which I found very insightful. And sometimes this data is really hard to find, because sometimes people that have a lot of money, when they have $1,000 to spend every day, they don't know what to spend it on. They buy media companies, and then they shift the narrative in their favor. So it can be hard to find this data. So I hope that's helpful. Thanks to Mama Llama and to all my lovely audience members for the great questions and comments. Happy to have a discussion. If you disagree, just please be kind. That's all I ask. Kind and respectful. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.